With rookie drafts in full flow, trade offers going back and forth, player value is a hot fantasy topic right now. So, Edward, what better time to play Keep Trade Cut?
Indeed, yeah, keep trade cut. Now, just to make it clear, in the scenarios we're going to put to you, keep trade cut, it's unlikely we would cut any of the three, but it's just a little bit of a game. And we are thinking about dynasty value here. So we're looking at dynasty leagues when we're thinking about keep trade cut.
I have for you first, Ed, 3 aging running backs. I mean, obviously, as young whippersnappers ourselves, we can't even imagine being as old as some of these guys. First up, we have Alvin Kamara, who will be 30 next season. Goodness me, he is so old.
Gosh, so
we
old.
have CMC, who some would have you believe is a complete dud for fantasy from here on in. He will be 29. And then Derrick Henry will be 31. For Dynasty, looking at startup drafts, I'd have all of these in the RB2 conversation, kind of mid to late RB2s, because you could be in for a year of elite production, but we know there's that kind of fall off completely with running backs, don't we? Last year, CMC, he missed most of it. We know that. Lots of people grumbled. Lots of people took him very high, if not the 101, and were very, very annoyed by him. Derrick Henry exceeded expectations. We knew he was going to get some good running work. We knew he would be fantasy relevant, but he ended up as the RB2 on the season. Alvin Kamara was RB9 on the season, only missed 3 games. That is within the realms of expected missing of a time when it comes to a running back. But on points per game, he was the RB5, which is a little bit higher than I thought it would be. Are we finding it easy so far, or would you like me to throw into the mix where I think these players could be this season?
I'll be honest, it's already very difficult. So I think I need a little bit more context, please, Mark.
Let's be realistic. CMC has in his realms of possibility being the RB1 overall this season. If he remains injury-free, we know what he's capable of. We've seen it time and time again. Derrick Henry, I think, is fairly comfortable being an top 5 RB over the course of the season. He's Mr. Reliable. He just keeps grinding through season after season after season. Is RB1 overall impossible? I'd say improbable with some of the candidates, but it's not completely off the table. Alvin Kamara, lowest ceiling of these players, but his pass catching work, we know is tried and tested for fantasy value. We know how important he is to the New Orleans offense. I think he looks a safe RB1, top 12 RB. But where would you be looking if you were thinking about having to cut one of these?
It's difficult. I think I agree with what you say about CMC. He has the potential to be the 101. He suffered from the 101 curse last year, and it wasn't just one injury, it was several injuries, wasn't it? And I think that's the worry with CMC. The workload that he's gone through over the last few seasons seems to have caught up on him. And I'm worried this season from that point of view. Derrick Henry, on the other hand, although he's slightly older, seemed to have a very healthy season last season. Did he miss a game? You can tell me as the Ravens fan.
No, he had a couple of down games. I mean, if you've seen the videos of his off-season training, like running up hills with loads of weights attached to him, I think in the argument that's going on social media at the minute, the gorilla versus 100 people, one Derrick Henry is taking out a silverback.
Oh, indeed. And I think Alvin Kamara, again, I think you make a great point about his pass catching work. And I think it'll be interesting to see the evolution of Alvin Kamara if that continues, because he's definitely a dual threat. I'm finding it very difficult. When you're thinking about trades, you need to think about value. So I'm wondering whether there's value in CMC. As you say, people still see him potentially as maybe being a 101. I don't. So I think potentially I would have him as my trade candidate, because I think that I would get some value in him, and there would be people whose eyes widen and think I could get a 101 season out of him because he's done it before.
I think actually of the 3 of these, CMC is the only one you could give any answer for. I could see an argument for keeping him, one for trading him, one for cutting him. I think a lot of people would cut him because he's done them wrong before and they don't want him anymore. Derrick Henry, you're not cutting. He just seems to be so reliable. Whereas I think Alvin Kamara is a tougher one to pick to keep over either of them. So would be the trade cut. I think I would be going for. I'm quite bullish on CMC, and I think he's got a couple of seasons. If he remained injury, I'd take the gamble and keep CMC, trade Derrick Henry to want that value, and after looking at the maximum ceiling, I think I would cut Alvin Kamara.
I think we're agreed on that. I'd cut Kamara. I don't like doing that. And of course, as we said at the start, we wouldn't do it in real life. But out of the three, I think you're right about his ceiling. And Derrick Henry, I just think, as you say, he's so reliable. I think you're guaranteed surely to get another great season out of him, possibly two. And he overperformed last season. RB2 was phenomenal. And I don't see the Ravens offense hasn't changed much through free agency and the draft, and it's going to be very much kind of as you were. So I expect him to have a similar workload.
Please do consider subscribing, liking, and sharing either on YouTube or your podcast app of choice. And then by all means, get yourself stuck into the comments and tell us why we are completely wrong on who we have chosen to keep trade cut. We would enjoy your feedback very much. Edward, over to you for our second trio.
Yes, I'm excited by this trio. We are looking at a rookie quarter. Of course they're not. They are no longer rookie quarterbacks. They are now sophomore quarterbacks entering their second year in the NFL. So we have three for your delectation here, Mark. We have, first up, the number one overall pick from last year's draft, the 2024 draft, Caleb Williams. We have if Jaden Daniels wasn't there, it would have been a stellar season, and it still could be described as a stellar season from Bo Nix. And then Drake May didn't start initially, but came good later in the season. So if we look at their stats from last season, Caleb Williams finished up as QB 16. He had 7 scores of 15 or more, 7 scores, fancy scores of 15 or more. Bo Nix finished as QB 7. He had 11 scores of 15 or more last season, a great first season. What week did he throw his first touchdown pass, Mark?
Oh, I remember we spoke about this last year, didn't we? 5?
Very close. Week 4. So first 3 weeks, nada, nothing. And he ended up with 29 passing touchdowns in total. So he really kind of, once he got going, he was into his rhythm. And then Drake May finished up as QB 23. But he had 7 scores of 15 or more. So the same as Caleb Williams. But he also, bear in mind with Drake May, he didn't start until week 6. So he was not a day one quarterback. So I think that quarterback 23 finishes maybe is definitely a little bit misleading. He was definitely in your top half of quarterbacks. So that's their stats, Mark. So I'll give you some starters. I've got a bit more information about their situation. Are you starting to move somewhere, or do you want a bit more information?
I think at the minute I've got my order in mind, but situation me up, Ed.
Indeed. So Bo Nix, I think the big news with Bo Nix is he's had a big upgrade at tight end. They have traded for Evan Engram, who we're going to talk more about later on, so I won't say much about him now, but that's a big upgrade at tight end. Drake May, I think really significant for Drake May was that the Patriots, with the 4th overall pick, took Will Campbell at left tackle, so a huge piece at protecting Drake May. They also picked up Travion Henderson at running back and Kyle Williams as a wide receiver. And they've also picked up Stephon Diggs as a veteran wide receiver. So some more ammunition for Drake May. And Caleb Williams, similar to Nix, he's had a nice upgrade at tight end. They drafted Colston Loveland, who I know you were very high on, as the 10th overall pick. And in the next round, in round 2, they drafted Luther Burden, the wide receiver. So some more weapons for Caleb Williams there. So that's all I've got, Mark. Where are you sitting?
With the keep, I always go with my gut when it comes to ceiling. I know sometimes there's safer options where you want to keep player and you want to go for that trade where the maximum ceiling is. I genuinely feel, especially with the upgraded O-line, Caleb Williams has the highest ceiling of these over his future career. I think it was really ignored, I think, the criticism Caleb Williams took last year, how poor the O-line were. Yes, he had a part to that, but he was a rookie quarterback. He was a rookie quarterback who kept taking a hammering because he had a colander for an O-line. That has been upgraded significantly. The tight end upgraded seems as well. So I think I would keep Caleb Williams. Now, who out of the other two, who would I rather have? It would be Drake May, I think. But
so you're cutting Bo Nix?
No. Yeah.
Yes, you are.
No, I am. I want to go back on myself then, but I think I am because I really, really like Bo Nix, but I think the situations around Drake May puts a little bit of flashing. We said last year, Bo Nix was such a quiet season. If I had to trade one of them, I think I'd probably get more for Drake May. What do you think?
It is incredibly difficult. When I sat down to look at this, you maybe have an order in your head, and I was thinking, I don't like this. I don't want to cut any of them, as we said. And I think, again, thinking back to what we said with the previous one, maybe I trade Nix because I think I'd get good value for him after his stellar season. And, I don't think he overachieved, but, can he back it up? I think there's more potential in Drake May. I'm excited by Drake May. I genuinely am. I think he came really good, went under the radar a little bit, and he's got some great weapons. So I think I'd potentially trade Bo Nix. I think I'd cut Caleb Williams, and I'd keep Drake May. Controversial maybe, but I'm just excited by Drake May.
Well, this is the exact reason I didn't want us to include Jaden Daniels in this, is because that was too easy then for the keep. It's all three. I'm really, one of the favorite things I'm looking forward to this next season is how these year two quarterbacks kick on.
Genuinely exciting, yeah,
because it's in line for one of the better QB classes we've had for a very, very long time, isn't it?
Indeed.
Next, let us look at some wide receivers. Now, I'm billing these as wide receiver 3s in startup drafts for Dynasty that have got that wide receiver 2 potential as well. The age of some of these really comes into play as well. So when we're having a look at these players, that's a big part to factor into it. Let's have a look though at the rankings. I would put all of them between wide receiver 25 and wide receiver 30 in Dynasty wide receiver startup rankings. I think I'd probably put McLaurin as the highest of those, but I'll explain why I'm also a little bit down on that later on. And I'll probably go Olave and then Metcalf. Metcalf obviously gets a little bit of that post George Pickens bump now in Pittsburgh. We've gone thinking, what will this mean for Pickens with DKB in there? What will that split be? The split will be between those two 100% to DK because George Pickens is out of here. Looking last year, though, DK Metcalf was wide receiver 32. Chris Olave only played 8 games. Terry McLaurin comfortably the better of them as wide receiver 7. I said all of these, I think, have got wide receiver 2 potential, possibly low-end wide receiver 1 on the season. They're all in the mix as well around the Jalen Waddle, Jordan Addison sort of range for me. DK, we've said Steelers obviously got George Pickens out, but they also haven't had a reliable fancy wide receiver since Ben Roethlisberger. They've not really, have they? It's just not happened. What are the Steelers doing as well? I've not really elaborated on that point because I've got so many little tangents I could go off on that, and this is not a long-form podcast. I could spend all day trying to answer that question. He's going to be 27 this season. Chris Olave, the youngest by far, is currently 24, will be 25 by the end of the season. Is he catching passes from Derek Carr or Shook? Who knows? I mean, Derek Carr kept giving hospital passes last season. They're probably not the best of friends at the moment. Only had 2023 as wide receiver 16. That was his highest peak. He's played 39 games. How many of those has he finished as a top 12 wide receiver, Ed?
Olave,
Yeah.
39 games, top 12 wide receiver. 10?
8.
Right.
And I imagine you were going 10 as a conservative number as well. And it's lower than that.
I was.
He's got age on his side, though, as we've said. Terry McLaurin last year was great, but it was his 6th year and his first as a wide receiver one. Yes, he's got Jaden Daniels slinging in the ball, and they seem to build up that rapport. But he will be 30 this year, and that's what takes a little bit of that hit on the dynasty value as well. I have changed my mind umpteen times on this. I've gone around and around like a little carousel of keep, trade, cut. Over to you, Ed. Who you keeping? Who you trading? Who you cutting?
I'll be honest, my keep is really easy because you mentioned it, and it comes down to quarterback. Now, who knows what is happening? Well, I think we kind of know what's happening in quarterback in Pittsburgh. We know that Aaron Rodgers is going to end up there, but in New Orleans, probably Derek Carr. Who knows? Maybe the rookie will be slinging the ball to Olave, but McLaurin has got the best quarterback situation. Jaden Daniels nailed on. Great rookie season, great rapport. And I take into account McLaurin's age, but he had his best season last season, been a reliable wide receiver for several years now. So I think you've got 2 really good years out of him at least. So McLaurin I would keep. When it comes to, I think I'd probably cut Olave. You've been high on him for several years now, and he's one of those players, a bit like Kyle Pitts. Like, when are we going to get it from him? Yeah. There are mitigating factors with Olave. I get that, but his talent is not breaking through at the moment. So I'd probably try and trade for DK because I think, like you mentioned, with Pickens going, he's going to have a lot of value as whoever ends up, i.e. Aaron Rodgers, as quarterback. DK is going to be getting the ball a lot from him. So I think you get decent trade value. So I'd keep McLaurin, I'd trade DK, and I'd cut Olave, unfortunately.
I completely agree. I go the exact same way. However, could also see a route where in 2 years' time we look back on this and go, well, Olave's plainly been the better choice to keep.
Oh, yeah, we look ridiculous.
He's only 24. We could have a change of QB that really works for him, but the probable route isn't as strong as the others, is it? And it could also be that Olave's player, we are constantly going next season, maybe next season.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's what I've been doing. It's like we've done with Kyle Pitts, like I'm constantly doing as a Manchester United fan at the moment as well. Next up then, Ed, who are you going to bring to the table for course 4?
Well, we have. I think it's probably a bit unfair to these gentlemen. We've called them aging tight ends, and I mean, look at them. They're wonderful, handsome young men. So I think aging tight ends is quite unfair. But we've got tight ends who are maybe moving towards the latter part of their career. David Njoku, Mark Andrews, and Evan Engram, who we mentioned earlier. So I will tell you where they finished. First of all. Over the last 4 years as tight end. So Mark Andrews last year finished as tight end 6. The year before, he was tight end 15, a heavily injury hit season. Tight end 4, and then he had his stellar breakout season the year before where he finished as tight end 1. And David Njoku last year was tight end 11. The 3 previous seasons, he finished as 6, 10, and 23, all of those with Cleveland. And then Evan Engram, last year, I'm going to ask you, where did Evan Engram finish last year?
It didn't take a lot to be a top 12 tight end, did it, last year? 6?
Way out. Tight end 33. He
really?
had some...
I've invented a good season for him.
You have. He had some big injuries last year, did Evan Engram. Maybe you're thinking to the previous seasons where he finished as tight end 2 and 5 in Jacksonville. And before that, he was tight end 24 in New York. So a bit of context in terms of where they finished over the last few years. But I think you need some more information, don't you?
Absolutely. You know I love the info.
So Mark Andrews, I mean, last season, let's look at it. He was written off by some after a very slow start. His first touchdown and score of 10 or fantasy score of 10 or more was in week 6. And I think that disappointed quite a few people. He was drafted as a top tier tight end last year, but I think those days are possibly over. There are other options in Baltimore at tight end and at wide receiver. And of course, that ridiculously strong running game with Lamar and Derrick Henry, do eat into Mark Andrews' workload. David Njoku had a very injury hit 2024. But even outside of that, he was quite up and down. He only had 2 scores of 20 or more, and he had 5 weeks where he scored under 10 points. It's an uncertain situation. Of course it is. It's Cleveland. He's performed admirably, I'll get the words out, through the mess of the last few years that have been the Cleveland Browns. There are a few other things to throw into the mix with Njoku. Will Fannin, the rookie, eat into his workload? Will injuries continue to affect him? Sorry, Browns fans, will the car crash that is the Browns offense ultimately derail him? Evan Engram, coming off his worst season in the NFL, but a lot of that can be put down to injuries that limited him to just 9 starts. But the talent is there. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a huge upgrade at tight end for Bo Nix and Denver. If he stays fit, I think Engram is a top 5 tight end candidate. But he's the eldest of the 3, which surprised me. He doesn't look the eldest, but he is the eldest of the 3 at 30 years old. So where are you?
I think for me, the player I would cut is the player that actually is probably demonstrated they can be the biggest talent, and that's Njoku, just because I hate the situation. I really do. Mark Andrews, I think the question marks are, I think people feel the question marks are because of that slow start to last season, and people forget about his off-season issues with that car accident and stuff that can disrupt his training camp significantly, and then that drop on the goal line in the playoffs as well. The actual reason behind it is the fact that he carries a heavy cap hit, and Isaiah Likely has gone from strength to strength to strength. I think that was purely a footballing decision that he would be moved on for the roster. Evan Engram, cannot wait to see him in that situation. We were hoping that we would see a Colston Lover or a Tyler Warren land in Denver, but Evan Engram is a tasty pickup there as well. I think, though, that it's a really, really tough one, because even if Mark Andrews does leave in his trade, he'll be traded somewhere where he will be the clear tight end 1. No one's trading to be part of a tight end group. And that is what damages him slightly in Baltimore. I think it's I'm going to have to go for ceiling. I just think I'm going to have to against what I would love to say. And I'd love to say I'm definitely keeping Mark Andrews. I think I'd probably keep Evan Engram and trade Mark Andrews. I think they've probably got similar outcomes, and I could get more for Andrews in a trade.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an easy decision, easy-ish to cut Njoku. You can still have a great season, but his situation is diabolical. And I really can't choose between the other 2. I think, ultimately I'll probably come down on keeping Engram, because I think he's going to have a stellar season under Bo Nix. But there might be decent value in Andrews. But, it's really difficult to choose between those 2.
And I think I changed my mind in my head while you were talking, and I would go back and forth those constantly. So that is one. Definitely, please, if you can get yourselves into the comments and let us know who you would go for there. Or are we completely wrong? Should we actually be keeping David Njoku all along anyway? Right, final one then, Edward. And this is one that I've billed hot seat running backs. These are running backs that I don't think have secured jobs beyond this season if they don't have a good 2025. We've got Kenneth Walker, we've got Isaiah Pacheco, we have DeAndre Swift. Now, looking at Dynasty rankings, where I would place is I'd put Kenneth Walker around that lower end of an RB2 for a Dynasty startup. Pacheco and Swift I put a little bit later. I'd probably put mid to late running back 3, probably around that pick sort of 28 sort of region when it comes to your running backs. Looking at last year, 8 11 games rather for Kenneth Walker, RB27. Isaiah Pacheco was RB64, but only with 7 games. DeAndre Swift was RB19 through just playing everything, but he only had 5 top 12 games. Next year, I see Kenneth Walker maybe mid RB2, Isaiah Pacheco maybe bottom end RB2, and DeAndre Swift maybe top end RB3. But the interesting with all 3 of these is all of them must have been a little bit twitchy going into the draft with so many prime running backs on the board. Kenneth Walker is a situation I would be most worried about because Zach Charbonnet did a good job in his absence last year, and he has got Charbonnet knocking on the door. Pacheco's got Hunter Mitchell for competition, not worried about them. Swift has got Roschon Johnson and the rookie Kyle Manninge, who was picked in round 7. Not worried about them either. What I would be worried about for all 3 of these is I could see Seattle, Kansas, and Chicago all making a late trade for a running back, potentially. Also, J.K. Dobbins is sat on that unrestricted free agent tender, so if no one else comes in, he could be back in LA, but I think he could be an interesting picker for all of these situations as well. Last year of contract for Kenneth Walker, last year of contract for Isaiah Pacheco, 2 years left on the contract for DeAndre Swift. And none of them are safe. All of them require big seasons. This is the first one where my toughest decision is I'm not really sure I'd actually want to keep any of them.
Indeed. I was just about to say I could potentially cut all 3. And I think, but I mean, when it comes down, DeAndre Swift is a really underwhelming player. Do you know what I mean? He's one of those players who just exists. And that's really unfair. I'm sorry, DeAndre, if you're listening. But yeah, I think I'd find it quite easy to cut DeAndre Swift. I do think he's probably got the best situation, as you say, that Chicago haven't really addressed the running back room, but I could see them drafting somebody, not drafting. I could see them trading quite late to get somebody. I think Pacheco's in the best scenario in Kansas City. He's a clear RB1 there. There's no competition. Yes, he had injury issues last year, but when he played, he showed some real dynamism and he looked like a top quality running back. So I think the ceiling is massive with Pacheco. So I'd keep him. So I suppose that means I'd try and get some value out of Kenneth Walker and trade him. Although, again, a bit like DeAndre Swift, he's quite underwhelming. So, yeah, that's where I'd sit. But I wouldn't be confident in any of those decisions.
I should have said at the top as well, quick shout out to NFLK Badger on BlueSky, because it was him that put this on our thread about this show, suggesting these as a trio. And it is really true. And this is the only one of the 5 discussed where I think you could realistically have all 3 of these on your roster. And if I did, that's a roster that's in rebuild, and I'm trying to trade away all of them at this point. I think I think I would agree with you. I think, the Chiefs have got to have an actual fancy, relevant, consistent, reliable running back at some point, haven't they?
Surely.
Pacheco's injury last year, how much was he suffering from that? How much was he brought back early to make sure that the Chiefs did the business in the playoffs? Was he ready? Maybe not. Kareem Hunt was underwhelming, so it's not like they could just wait and kind of leave Hunt in there. So, yeah, Pacheco, I think there's an easier narrative to understand and tell yourself where he ends up coming out on top. And, yeah, Kenneth Walker, I think probably is the easy one to project having a solid season. So, yeah, would be my trade card, because I don't really see a great deal of difference between any of these 3. I agree with you. Well, that was a lovely, lovely 5 rounds of Keep Trade Cut. I had the pleasure, as always, to play a game with you. We have got loads more to come through the off season. Let's have a moment to shout out for a final time this show, though. The TH Fantasy Football Best Ball Bonanza, raising money for the Beast of Memory Cafe. Loads of people involved already. We would love to get ourselves past 200. So get yourselves down in the comments and click the link there. But I think that's all from us, isn't it, Edward? We've said all the things we need to say.
I think we have. I think we can call the ride, can we?
I think we shall go bada bing, bada bye. Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to Pestle and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Instagram and Twitter.